Dogs look at us so differently than humans do. They love us no matter how dumb or how weak or how stupid or how silly or how funny we are. They think we're great no matter what we do, which is so healing and so validating and so incredibly helpful when we're trying to dig ourselves out of the squishy feelings.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to share something really special, especially if you're someone who has big feeling dogs or just wants to do better by your dog. The Dog People Evolution Conference is a virtual event hosted by Matt Beisner. Yep, the one from today's episode. And it's all about emotional awareness, mutual respect, and helping dogs without control or shame. You'll get CEUs, real conversations, and community that actually gets it. I'll be attending, and if you're listening to this podcast, I know it'll speak to you too. Head to dogpeopleevolution.com to grab your spot. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, the podcast where no topic is off limits and no pet parent feels alone. This episode is a heart-centered conversation about what it really means to love dogs, not just through training, but through emotional growth and self-awareness. I'm joined by Matt Beisner, dog behavior specialist and the founder of the Dog People Evolution Conference. We're digging into the deeper layers of how our mental health and healing shape the way we show up for our dogs and why that matters more now than ever. If you've ever felt changed by your dog or questioned the stories you've been told about what dogs should be, this episode will stay with you. Let's get into it.
Some of you may know him from his Netflix series, and some of you just might know him from Instagram. Either way, he's here with us today. And how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm grateful. Glad to be here. In a lot of the circles that I work in, we do check-ins. So like at the start of with my business team, we start our meetings with check-ins. So I'm Matt Beisner. I am currently in Dripping Springs, Texas, and I'm feeling grateful. Always name 3 emotions because we've got to make space for the feelings. I'm feeling grateful, I'm feeling curious, and I'm feeling a little bit squishy. And with that, I am in.
Okay. Explain squishy to me.
Yes, there's something that I got introduced to years ago called the wheel of emotions because I had and have a very rich emotional life, but I have learned to actually make space for it. So one example of that is I've been able to be clean and sober with a lot of support for a while now. And another example of that is that when I focus on what the dog's emotional state might be, it really changes and informs the ways that I provide training support. I realized having gone from a lot of feelings, but not knowing how to name any of them to the wheel of emotions, which I think is a spectrum that has about 140 emotions on it. But then I have to include things like color. I have 2 young kids, and so we have a book that says some days I'm feeling blue, and some days it's brown, and some days it's yellow, and some days they're all in between. And then we got another awesome book called Tiger Days. Some days I'm like a tiger, and some days I'm like a hippo, and some days I'm like a bear. And that gave me a way to access the emotional experience in other ways that I hadn't before. So on this growing list of feelings, hangry is definitely a feeling. That's board certified feeling. Tired is not a feeling, but tired is usually the result of a lot of unexpressed feelings. So I've learned that one too. And then the weather is another way that through my ECPR, my emotional CPR training, I've learned to consider the weather as a parallel for my feelings. So I'm feeling a little bit cloudy and kind of stormy with some sunshine out there. And then the visceral, but that's my pity is back behind me stretching her legs out. She just had this sweet exhale. So squishy. So I guess I'm not even exactly sure what the squishy feeling is. I just know when I check in with my body and you ask the question that I'm feeling squishy. And to any of your listeners, my intros are usually like this long. So welcome to it. And I'm sorry.
No, we're here for it. I mean, that's why people show up, right? Because they want to get to know the real side of the person behind the Instagram account. That's why I started this, because Instagram is this candy coated perfection. Look at how wonderful my life with my dog is. Look at all these beautiful things we can do with our dogs. Awesome. But they don't ever show the messy side of it. And I think that the messy side is so important because that's the side that I think most of us relate to the best. So when you say squishy, I feel like in my feelings, I feel not quite certain about how the day is going to go. And I feel just like I don't really know what my feeling is. So it's just kind of like those stress ball things,
Yeah.
right? You're just constantly changing and taking on the pressure, but it's also letting it go at the same time. And it's malleable to the situation currently. That's how I feel when you say that.
Yeah, that's actually that's a pretty good read. I'll have to next time I'm feeling squishy, I have to ask you what I'm feeling. That's a pretty
Okay.
good read, and I think part of what I hear and what you're saying too that is true for where I'm at is I'm in a technically life is always unknown. I'm aware of feeling myself in a state of unknowing that is potentially terrifying and potentially invigorating at the same time, you know? And so I think that your breakdown of squishy tracks with that. I have to make space for the movement of the feelings and the energy, and also learning what I've learned about how to care for myself and coming from a childhood of chaos. I'm also aware that the feeling of squishy has a touch of fear to it because I feel vulnerable because the idea is that I don't have my boundaries.
Hmm.
If I have this feeling, it must mean I don't have my boundaries. And I don't make really good decisions. And it's not true. It's not true that I'm not safe, but sometimes I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
So I guess that's true. That's important in its own way. I got to be careful about making decisions based on the need for relief. And I have to be careful about making decisions when the answer seems to be that I need to control this. Those are two problematic ways to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's another thing that's kind of a common thread in the dog human world. A lot of us who work with animals, whether we're trainers, vet techs, doctors, whatever, the mental health and addiction spectrum, the crossover is
Mhm.
so huge. It's unbelievable how many of us have some kind of mental health or addiction, or both in some cases. But then we've turned to the animals, and it has almost helped us. I don't even know what the right way to say it is, but it's helped us come back to who we are, and it's helped us focus and accept who we are, because dogs look at us so differently than humans do.
Yeah.
And they love us no matter how dumb or how weak or how stupid or how silly or how funny we are. They just think we're great no matter what we do, which is so healing and so validating and so incredibly helpful when we're trying to dig ourselves out of the squishy feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even give myself space to be in it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is how I'm feeling. When we go on a walk, my dog's going to have a snifari. This is not a time for me to handle my feelings with putting my walk in a hard heel for the entire time. That's just not how it's going to go. I haven't done that for a long time anyway, but yeah, the parallel there, I didn't realize I got out of jail for a DUI. I had a pretty tough time making sober decisions for a while, and I got out of jail for a DUI. I could barely put a sentence together. Literally, I could barely complete a sentence. That's how mushy my thinking, my brain had got. And I moved in with somebody who for some reason wanted to be my girlfriend at the time, and she had a 7, 8 month old terrier that she had just adopted named Kingston, just an extraordinary being. And she would go work, and I was detoxing at her place, living off of her. Is kind of the way I rolled at that time. But the dog needed to go outside, but he was a terrier. He was a rescue terrier with a lot of big feelings who was 8 months old. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I was afraid of dogs at that time. I got bit when I was a kid on Halloween, and I grew up afraid of dogs. So there I was in adulthood, full adulthood, out of jail, crashing at my then girlfriend's place with this dog who we would have back then called aggressive. Now I would say it's unmet needs and unheard feelings. And that's how I got sober, which I don't recommend that as a detox formula for anybody. But to your point, I had to take him outside to go to the bathroom. So my practice of caring for him was the antidote to isolation. There's quite a bit of compelling evidence to suggest that the opposite of addiction is not necessarily recovery or sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Mm-hmm.
And the predictor to addiction is isolation. So dogs give us that chance to connect, and then we connect with other people. And then along the way, if we're fortunate, I've been really fortunate. I was fortunate once I got out of jail to learn that, saying I don't know is actually that's a really powerful place to start asking for help. Little things that I just didn't know how to do or didn't do. And then along the way, I began to, after several years in with working with dogs, really as a hack, mostly as copying stuff I saw on TV, I begin to see parallels with the dogs and myself. And then I begin to see people differently. That was the beginning of an extraordinary journey that's actually brought me to one of the reasons why I appreciated the timing of our talk today is that after 2.5 years of heavy lifting, myself and a couple of co-founders are launching the Dog People Evolution Conference. And it's an inaugural conference that is about supporting humans. Because for us, as the founders, if we want to help more dogs, we have to help more humans, period. You talk about the mental health matter. There's not a single school in the West that I know of, single certifying organization or school that has a mental health component built in. And one of my colleagues, Annie Phoenix, who's a speaker at DPE, she has made a concerted effort and has contacted, I think, including in Europe, every Western school and organization, including one in Europe, including some in Europe. And one in Europe got back to her expressing interest. And only one organization even responded to her email. And all of the rest of the schools, and you all know who you are, did not even reply. And Annie's not a slouch. She's a best-selling author. She's a 25-year veteran of dog training. So why don't we have mental health as at least adjacent, if not primary factor of consideration before we go out and serve people and their dogs?
It's wild to me because I recently had a video that I remixed about a dog that was resource guarding a watermelon. And
I saw that one.
My gosh, the comment section, you guys, is so terrible. The number of people that want to have physical dominant control over something else is absolutely unbelievable to me. It makes me feel like the situation for dogs is dire. People saying they would beat the dogs, people saying they would get the belt out, people saying to throw the dog down the stairs, to put the dog down. Mental health just screaming in that comment section. I understand that people have bad childhoods, bad experiences, not great relationships with their parents. Some people still, even though the stigma now is to not beat your children, it still happens. There are abusive relationships with parents, especially people who have parents who are actively alcoholics, drug addicts, things like that, anger issues that are too macho or too proud to ask for help, to reach out and say that mental health is a thing and that we need help. It is unbelievable to me that it is 2025 and people still don't understand that mental health is a huge part of what we do. I know that you know Jess from Handlers and Humans. She's been on the podcast before and I'm in her community. I have a reactive dog, and having that kind of support and hearing other people talk about their experiences and really being able to say, hey, this isn't just me. It is valid for me to be upset about this, but it's also valid for my dog to have feelings, because a dog is a living, sentient being that has emotions, and that is normal because it's a living being. And the number of people that don't know that it's okay for your dog to have feelings, or that your dog has feelings.
Yep.
Is unbelievable to me. I just don't understand it. It's like it's disposable. It should follow every one of my wants, needs, and orders, and it should do exactly what I say, when I want it to, where I want it to, and how I want it to, without question. It's a freaking dog, man. Like, what?
Yeah.
It's disturbing.
Yeah, you basically just described colonialism.
It's a sad, sad situation that we are in, unfortunately.
Yeah, one of the really neat things about hearing from these speakers at DPE is that we made a conscious decision to not make this a dog training conference, because there's plenty of those, and there's plenty of awesome stuff out there to receive. But I know from my own lived experience that the way I needed help and reached out to dog trainers, and I was helped rather than judged, and supported rather than shamed, which is fundamental learning principles, the not necessarily cultural principles, but fundamental learning principles. When I had that experience, that was revelatory for me, that A, people would do that because that was not the social media messaging, and B, that most people wouldn't do that. That was also kind of eye-opening. So I asked our speakers to talk about their significant experiences in their transformation, in their evolution as dog people, because I wanted to give myself and anybody that's going to attend the virtuals, the pods as we call them, they're like podcast style, two speakers, they each speak for 20 to 30 minutes, then we open the floor. Really, there's really fascinating these conversations. And I just wanted to create something that was relatable, or create a platform that gave dog people, dog professionals, dog people around the world access to the human experience in that dog relationship. Because like you said, we don't talk about it. And with this mindset that for whatever reason, I have to control you, justified or not, with that mindset, it's really hard to, as a dog person, to feel like there's somebody out there you can relate to.
It really is. And it's wild, like I said, because there are so many of us who have been through the same thing, who experience the same issues mentally, emotionally, health-wise, all of the things. And yet, as a culture, we're so deterred from asking for help, which is exactly why I started the podcast, because I asked for help. I asked for help and I asked for help and I asked for help. And I still was running into, especially because of where I live in the United States, right? In Iowa, we have farm dog culture here. And people don't understand farm dog culture.
Yeah, I'm in
because
Texas. Yeah.
You understand it. I lived in Texas too. We have farm dog culture in Texas. Those ranchers there's no joking when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that dogs are used as a tool. They are part of the farming equipment. They are not assigned emotional well-being or attention at all. They live in a barn. They sleep on a bale of hay. They have food and water out there, and they do not come into the house. They do not interact with the humans. They work all day long, and that is their purpose. And when they are no longer of use, the shotgun comes out, and it's awful and it's heartbreaking and it's so sad. And I saw this on Instagram the other day too. Somebody said, why isn't this illegal? Dogs in the back of truck beds. That's all part of farm culture. And even though I don't agree with it, I understand that sometimes we just can't move the culture forward in some areas because it's been that way for so many years. And until somebody comes along and wants to make it different, it's not going to be different. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at with things like Dog People Evolution and Straight Up Dog Talk, because we're here to say, hey, we're not here to judge you. We're not here to shame you. We're not here to make you feel guilty about what we're doing. But can you give us just a few minutes to help you make a little bit of space and talk about this? And maybe you'll feel differently about it afterwards. And I think that is so important, that we're starting to accumulate spaces like that, instead of people doing what I did, which was go through a bunch of trainers who wanted to put an e-collar and a shock collar on my dog, not try to help me understand him at all, and then go down the black hole of Google and become even more confused. And then by the grace of God, stumble onto somebody like Jerry, Sailor Jerry, and finally be able to be like, I get it. I have a dog that is mostly border collie. He has too much energy. He's also got some other working breeds in him. He's not an idiot. He just doesn't know what to do with himself because he's too smart and he's supposed to be herding sheep.
Yep. Okay,
we can fix that. And the Kim Brophy's program, I went through her family dog mediation program, and that was
powerful,
life-changing.
Yeah, same.
Life-changing. I've had dogs all my life, and I hate that when people say that now, because I've had dogs all my life too, and I still, in my late 30s, didn't know what I was doing because I got a dog that acted differently than every other dog I had ever had, and I made mistakes, and I still make mistakes. Same. But the beauty of it is that we're willing to ask questions and learn and lean on other people. And that's where the real change comes in. That's where the growth comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. That idea, like I've had dogs all my life. That's like me saying, I've been driving for a long time. Well, you've been a shite driver like most of that time. So what have you been practicing? Shite driving?
Well, yeah. And then let's add texting and driving into that too, because I've been driving all my... Somebody compared texting and driving to like changing CDs out in your car in the 90s. And I was like, no, not the same.
Not the same. But I think in hindsight, I think that was the gateway. Like
it probably was.
Especially when the CD got stuck in there and you're like pounding on it, which occasionally it was such a random reinforcer. Sometimes it would come back out. And then you're
My
like, oh, this
gosh,
is going to
yes.
work. I'm just going to punch the CD player.
Glad that I didn't live in the era where they had tape decks, because the tapes messing up and unspooling and all that, that could have been pretty chaotic too, I feel
Yeah.
like.
I remember that on my mom's car. Tape decks and 8 tracks and all of that. Yeah, there's something to him about when you're talking about people not asking for help or wherever a particular aspect of the dog culture is. I realize for myself as I continue to just try to stay open, and behind me is my 12-year-old pitty mix, blue nose pitty mix, Deja Blue, and she and I met at, I guess, 10 weeks old. So you're about 12, right, Boo? She's about 12. I don't know. It's our best guess. But my point is that she's what we would probably now call a highly sensitive dog, which is, they probably all are. I think we're just becoming more sensitive to how sensitive they are. But with Deja, what I'm learning is a whole other level of how to engage with the dog, because she's so subtle and so sensitive to changes in the environment that I really have to manage myself when I'm in her space. I have to be mindful. That's a better word. Manage is that there's a control aspect that I got to be mindful with her in a way that I didn't with my terrier, for example, or my or my husky wolf, who always had me on point. And so it's changing me. Again, it's changing me. And what I'm getting at is that there's a moment where, as I'm working with Deja and just spending time with Deja, we don't really do a whole lot of training. I just practice living together well with dogs. Like, more than anything, that's the way I look at it. I think if people followed me around, they'd be surprised at how little dog training I actually do and how much relationship building I'm trying to support. So with Deja, she's changing me in ways that I hadn't anticipated. And the point that I'm prolonging here is the reckoning of what I didn't do is hard to swallow. And I know for a fact that I'm not alone in that. And sometimes, whether it's a conscious recognition or an underlying fear, the fear of that kind of personal transparency, it can be enough for somebody to not change.
It can be.
We certainly see it in our systems. And before we even launched DPE, we put a poll out to about 30,000 people on social media. 74% of the people said that they struggle most with isolation and the hierarchy. 74% of dog people said that.
That's sad. That's
brutal.
so sad.
Brutal.
It breaks my heart that people struggle in their daily lives with their daily relationships. And then instead of trying to find a healthy outlet for their anger, for their distress, for their sorrow, they come home and they take it out in a negative way on their dog or their children or their neighbor, whatever. And it's just, it's so sad to me that we have gotten to that point in just humanity in general, that we think that it's okay to just unload like that on someone else because it makes us feel better in the moment. And we don't think about the context of what we are doing and how it affects others. We just worry about ourselves in those moments. And I'm not saying that I don't do it, because I'm sure that I do. I know that I do. But if I make a mistake, one day I come home and I'm not in the best mood, and Fitz is herding me down the stairs with his ball and he's so excited because he just wants to play because I've been gone all day and I'm grouchy. And then I get out in the yard and I'm like, oh, wait a second. I've been gone all day. Take a breath. He's just excited to see you. He just wants to play. And then by the time we're done, I feel a whole lot better because I've kind of just let everything else go around me instead of stomping around the backyard and being a jerk because he wants to play.
Oh gosh, totally. Yeah, I flinch and appreciate when people call it what it is, that our dogs are basically modern day captives. I have to wait for you to let me outside. I have to wait to pee. I have to wait to eat. I have to wait to explore. It's a lot. And that one of the, I guess maybe to a fault, they're so resilient. One of the magical things is that when I am willing to make a few changes, even if it's just stop doing something, like stop coming into the room, la, la, la. We have a lively household. I got 2 young kids. Everything's a musical with a bunch of dad jokes in it. And that's not Deja's style. So Deja Blue is going to go upstairs and she's going to opt out. So sometimes it's stop doing things, but sometimes it's remarkably simple. Like, you know what, Deja? I'm just not going to pet you. I'm going to sit near you, but I'm not going to touch you because you're pretty sensitive to touch. And those little things can go a long way. I mean, I know from a human experience feeling, I guess I don't have any other experience than the human experience. And for anybody, I'm looking at at my window on our screen. For anybody that's listening and not watching, my daughter's 5 foot tall stuffed giraffe is behind me over my shoulder. So the visual is I'm talking to Em, and then there's just this giraffe that
The peanut gallery.
hasn't moved, like so still. It's really impressive. Giraffe just doesn't want to be noticed, but it doesn't take much. It's really something. You know, like you think about the grind and trying to support dogs and the challenges and their people and all of that. And then there are these moments that probably proportionally they're so small, like the wins proportionally are so small, but in terms of impact, they're so significant. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, because it almost brings me to tears every time. The privilege of being in that where you see a dog see the world or themselves differently.
The best feeling in the world. Well, you got me all emotional too. Geez.
Yeah.
What do you think is your hardest won victory in that aspect?
One of my favorites. I've worked the divine irony is that I went from loving dogs and then being bit as a kid and then being afraid, and then I ended up specializing in aggression and reactivity and high risk aggression cases. And sidebar, I don't get bit anymore. That was a really important thing. I heard I want to come to your question, but I want to make sure I say this. I went to a conference, an APDT conference in 2016 or something like that. It was up in Washington State, and I heard a speaker say that he had only been bit once. I think it was Ken McCourt. Yeah, he'd only been bit once in 30 years, and I was like, how is that possible?
Only been bit once in 30 years.
See, like, so for the listeners, like, here's the difference between a responsible human being and this guy. I had, because so much of how I came up into the dog training world, there was so much of my own ego involved that I thought that being bit was actually a sign of how brave I was. I had no idea the impact it was having on the dog, including the fact that I let it get to that point. But aggression is really costly emotionally. I'm not talking about for me, for the dog, emotionally, socially, biologically. So even with all of that, one of the most impactful dogs I got to work with is a dog named Finnegan, 4-year-old double Merle Aussie, 70 pounds, visually impaired and deaf, straight up deaf. And he did not play. Like he did not play because of his physical limitations. He'd been in a shelter for I think 3 years, and he would have a visitor, an angel named John, would show up and work with him and care for him. But Finnegan didn't get any access to regular social experiences. And one of the best things I ever did was not work with him until I was ready. And I understood, because I'd learned some things the hard way when we were running our facility in LA, that I needed to tap out. What we started to see, we created a debrief process whenever there was an incident. And remarkably, there were actually very few incidents, considering we were working with a high risk group, 50 to 60 dogs a day, 15 people on the staff, a lot of action. We rarely had incidents, but every time we had an incident, what we started to do is make sure the dog was okay, make sure the person was okay, take 10 minutes, and then let's reconvene. And then the first question, once after we checked in, was, what would you have done differently? And I think I got that from my recovery. I don't know, like I got that idea in my head from somebody else, because I wasn't much on self-reflection. Self-obsession, yes, but not self-reflection. And when we started to break it down, what we found is there was always a moment where somebody said, I had a feeling, or I saw this. It never came out of the blue. So when I heard Ken McCourt say he only been bit once in 30 years, and I was like, oh man, I've been on an ego trip. No more. I'm putting it on the calendar like my sober date. I am not getting bit anymore. And I had a couple of slips after that, not drinking, but with getting bit, because I had to unlearn some behaviors. But I waited 2 years, 2 years of consistent work with my staff and I waited 2 years to actually walk Finnegan on a leash myself. And he looked up and he smiled and we walked, and I was feeling nervous. That was a huge win for me. And I just sat my busy self out and just kept waiting and waiting and waiting till he was ready for me to be ready. Love that dog.
It's such an incredible feeling when you're working with a dog like that, who doesn't trust anybody, who won't let anybody get near them, who has bitten everyone else around. And the next thing you know, that dog is your best bud. And everybody is going, what did you do? What just happened here? Why is this? And that was when I was a vet tech. I mean, it's still that way now, but when I was a vet tech, that was me. Yeah, that's why I was the head vet tech, because I was the one that was able to sit down and go through things. A crazy experience I think that I ever had. We had this little dog that would come in, this little white terrier mix, and it had seizures. And it would come in and it would be snarling and seizing. And it was one of the most awful things I ever had to experience. But I would take her into the very back. We had this area that was supposed to be for dogs who were in recovery. So it was in the very, very back. And I would just go in the back with her and I would turn the light off. And I would set her down on the floor. We would sit in the middle of all the kennels, and she would kind of like rage out over in the corner for a minute. And then I would just talk to her very quietly, very softly, until she stopped, and she would kind of just walk herself out of her seizure. And then she would walk over and she would lay down in my lap and go to sleep. And then we would be able to give her medication and give her something for pain. And I would take her back to her parents. And everyone was always like, what? I don't understand. I'm like, you guys are trying to do all of this stuff to her. You're putting so much pressure on her, and she already doesn't know what's happening to her body. She has no control in this situation. And you guys are trying to just pin her down to the table. And of course she's going to bite somebody. Just give her a minute here. Like, let's just relax a little bit. But again, that people trying to control the situation. Yes, they were trying to help her, but they were trying to force her, which was making the seizures worse, which was making her reaction harder. And it was too much. It was too much for her, and she couldn't handle it. She eventually did have to be put down because the seizures became too frequent. It was just not fair to her. But it was one of the most miraculous things that I've ever experienced, because that dog trusted me. They would come into the hospital and they would put her in my arms. Her name was Maggie. They would put her in my arms, and I would just take Maggie back to the back, and we would just go do our thing. And she immediately would just like relax the second she was in my arms. It was just such a cool experience.
I'm having a visceral response, and I'm sure a lot of people are just listening to it. Even when you talk about her coming into your arms and relaxing, I just felt my shoulders drop and my breathing change. Thinking about Finnegan, I want to give a special shout out to Kelly and Maureen, a couple of friends of mine who were his humans. And that was also a really valuable part of my lesson, because these women were so committed to Finnegan's well-being. They were uber responsible. And I learned a lot from them. And a big part of my learning was, well, you're already really proactive about this, and I'm not at this time qualified to work with Finn the way that you need it, but other people on my team are. So I kept learning from them what works for Finnegan. And that was just it's just a great experience. I'm grateful that Finn has since passed. We're friends to this day. And I think that's another important thing to bring in when we think about coming back to this poll and 74% of people feeling isolation in the hierarchy. This framework that we've set up in this multi-billion-dollar dog industry that is predicated on you, consumer, just don't know. You just don't know. So we're just going to tell you what to do. And as long as your dog does X, Y, Z, you'll be happy. And here's what you got to buy. But it totally dismisses the own wisdom of that individual, of that human being. I bet there's a bunch of people that are listening out here that are kick-ass dog people. They make great choices, and they care deeply, and they make sacrifices, and they make health choices for themselves. I mean, there's so much that is so easily dismissed because it didn't come from the hallowed halls of something that is the yaysayer. You know what I mean? It's just garbage.
Yeah.
It's a garbage mindset. I happen to have benefited from it. I mean, I recognize white male television show. There's no way around the fact that I got access to things that other people won't ever have access to. But and I never thought I'd be glad to say I was glad that my show got canceled, because I got a real steep learning curve there. And then I had the freedom to go explore other things. And that's been a real gift. So I want to pause and credit and praise to all of you that are listening or watching that are making great choices every day. You may not feel like it. You may not think you are. Somebody else may not only not be telling you, they may be telling you the opposite. But I am sure that you're doing better than you're giving credit for.
What would you tell somebody who was starting to feel like they were maybe ready to change the way that they interact with dogs, and they're ready to move forward emotionally and connect with their dogs in a different way, as well as with themselves, and maybe recover from some of the harsher side of treatment that we have normalized in our culture? Where would you tell them to start?
Well, you know what I learned from my friend and mentor, Dr. Chris Pockle, veterinary behaviorist up in Portland area. And he was one of the early people I reached out to. He was just so gracious. One of the things I love about Chris's story is that he credits his people skills with the fact that his mentor was a social worker. So he brought that into his practice. He's just an exceptional human being. I learned from Chris what he calls coaching to principle. In fact, it took me some time before I realized he was coaching me to principle. But coaching to principle, in essence, means I have one principle here. So mine is I'm here to help take pressure off everybody in this house. That's it. So anything I do, technically, training wise, logistically, management wise, anything I do is about taking pressure off. And people, more or less, a lot of us are struggling with the same things. But when we get to that moment where people, and it's a pretty easy, I mean, just to like be crass, it's an easy sell because nobody's going to say, I would like more pressure. They will act with more pressure, but I've never met anybody said, I'd really like more pressure in this relationship with my dog. So once we have that common ground, neither of us want to have more pressure with our dog, then technically it gets pretty easy. Let me show you a couple of ways that might be easier for you. And to couple that with just enough awareness around the dog's body language so that they can see a shift. Then the buy-in, again, to be crass about it, then the buy-in is a lot easier. So that's really where I start. Tell me where the pressure is. And then we'll go from there. There's a lot of tears in our sessions.
Do you feel like people come to you who still struggle with feeling like dogs are worthy of better?
Yeah. I have it in my own family, and I haven't shared about this publicly, and I don't think my family is going to listen to this, so I'll roll with it. But I've got some family members. I will note that my family never asks me for help with their dogs, and they don't listen to how I want them to take care of my dog either. So,
Same.
For better or for worse, it wasn't until they saw me on TV where they actually thought I was a legitimate dog trainer, which is ironic because TV is TV. It takes us 80 hours to film a 44-minute episode, and it's all about numbers. The network can say animals first is our motto, but animals aren't first if the dollars aren't coming in.
Yeah.
So in my family, there is a dog, a purebred golden that was brought in that it was just labeled as the therapy dog. Had no therapy training. My judgment, didn't have therapy temperament, but people do that a lot. That's just the therapy dog. That's the helper dog. If you live in a multi-sibling house, those labels can be pretty challenging. And I started to see a lot of stress between that dog and a senior dog who was sick and on the road to dying. But the dynamics in the home were there were a lot of human dynamics there that were put into the dog's relationships. So the short of it is that the helper dog attacked the senior pug. And I said, in the best way that I thought they might be able to hear, because that was the first time they really sincerely asked me for help. And I said, here's things to watch for, and here are some simple things that can be done. Trigger warning regarding a dog attack. And they didn't listen. And the therapy dog attacked that pug, and soon after the pug passed. And I had never said anything to them about it since beyond what they are comfortable talking about. And they have had to frame that and shape that in their minds to look a certain way. And I understand why people do that. And then I come into the house soon after for a holiday, and the dogs have shock collars on. Just curious. And I don't even ask. They just volunteer, I think in part because they might feel a little bit strange when the dog trainer comes over. Look at it, and they immediately, it's just it's an understandable justification. They notice them when they're up on the couch. So I just walk around. Family members got the button hanging around their neck, and those dogs, in their estimation, are well managed. And no surprise, because fallout is fallout, the dogs are increasingly stressed, and I would argue that they listen worse than ever. They're now counter surfing and running out of the house, et cetera, et cetera. That is literally not in the home I live in, but that is in my immediate family. That's what's happening.
I had a similar thing happened to me. I have family members that are the same way. And I had a dog that was almost killed by one of my other dogs. I had to put my German Shepherd Izzy down because she became increasingly aggressive. I tried everything. I worked with trainers. I did behavior modification. And granted, this was 14 years ago, so things were a little bit different back then. And I often wonder if it was today, if things would be different. And I feel bad about it. But I also know that there was something not quite right about Izzy. And I don't know that even today she would have been helped. But Fiona lived. After Izzy got put down, Fiona lived. She had the repair. She was fine with my dog Cajun. But other dogs I didn't let be around her because she was triggered. Because if they would bark at her, lunge at her, she would have that trauma, that flashback. And I went through a divorce and I moved back to Iowa, and I was living with my parents, and they had 4 small dogs. Okay. And Fiona was a 120-pound, best guess German Shepherd Mastiff mix. She was huge. My parents had 4 small dachshunds, and I said, do not put your dogs outside when my dogs are outside because you have little dogs. They're not well mannered. They don't listen. They're going to bark at her, and something bad is going to happen because 120 to 20 is a big difference. And I was there for about a week, and I was outside with my dogs, and my mom opened the door and I said, don't do that. And she said, it'll be fine. Her 20-pound dog charged my 120-pound dog, and 2 dogs died the next day. So it's sad and it's awful. And I can only bring Fitz, my medium-sized dog, over there with advance notice so that they can put their dogs up, because she won't ever say it out loud, but I know that she's afraid that he's going to do the same thing. He won't. But because that happened and we never talked about it, that stigma just stays and hangs there in the air.
Yeah.
And it sucks. My little dog is welcome anytime. They'll watch Toby anytime. But the second Fitz comes over, everybody else has got to be put away. My sister and I are not allowed to bring our dogs over at the same time. Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Family dynamics make everything even more complex.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah. My son taught me a really great lesson too. I have tried to instill respect, not hammer home, try to get away from the old hammer home and double down and all of that. I try to instill just basic awareness, like when a dog's head turns away, no pet, no play, little things like that. But maybe through, I'm sure I got some parenting responsibility that sometimes if he wants to do something, he just wants to do something. He's 8, but also he keeps going over the top of dogs' heads, and he got corrected once. It was a small one, but he got bit. And I think he learned from that. But the thing I want to share is that he was outside recently. Dog got loose, and he came running in because he was really upset. He'd fallen and hurt his arm pretty badly. He was running from the dog because he thought the dog was going to attack him. It was probably like a 30-pound, I would guess, a heel or Chihuahua mix, something like that. And I went out to see where the dog was. It must have belonged to the neighbors up the street because it was underneath the car there. And when I approached it, had big feelings. But when we went to some other family member's house, they have dogs. Once we got into the house, we couldn't find him. And then ultimately I found him, and he was hiding in the office closet because he had been so traumatized by the experience of this small dog knocking him over that all of a sudden going to the family member's house where there were dogs was terrifying for him.
Jeez.
And I found him in the closet crying and not able to talk. And I'm really grateful that I have learned how to support him in moments like that. 2 things that stood out to me. One was it hadn't occurred to me that he would have trauma that would carry over like that, because we're just going to a family member's house with dogs you already know. But a really scary thing happened with the dog, and the precedent was established that when I see dogs, in spite of all of his learned history, when I see a dog, something dangerous might happen. So I was really grateful to have that blind spot shown to me. And then I was also just grateful because I get great parenting support from my wife and a bunch of other people that I was able to be there with him and hug and hold him. And I'm so sorry because that was not my experience coming up. And then it was able to pass. So yeah, we just don't know how these things impact.
It's great, though, that you recognize that that's not what you received as a child and that you're willing to give it to your child and your dogs. That's kind of beautiful because that shows the evolution right there.
Yeah, it's really something. It's not easy to receive. I've talked with a lot of people, and probably on this particular topic of receiving, I talked with a lot of people thousands of people over the last decade because I started to focus on my own inability or unwillingness or even allergy to receive love, care, support, kindness, healing. And I thought, that's so strange. Like on paper, logically, which usually gets me almost nowhere, but it's functional. Why wouldn't I want to receive? And then I realized when I broke down the experience of receiving, well, in order for me to receive something, which is different than taking and it is different than getting, receiving is a different experience. In order for me to receive, I am in a place of vulnerability, transparency, humility, usually tenderness, relationship. There's an emotional intimacy with actually receiving something, reflection. And I realized it's no wonder that I have trouble receiving because I don't like all of those things that I just described that are feelings and aspects of the experience are very foreign, if not just like really uncomfortable. Yeah, so to be in a place to receive help, to your point about my own evolution, to be in a place to receive help, it's really extraordinary. When I hear and observe a lot of people trashing other people the way that it's just become common to do, especially in social media, especially if it's one group versus another. And in DPE, one of the things that we're looking at very closely, racism, classism, sexism, how so many of these show up and how they're inherent in how we treat each other and how we treat our dogs. And when we look at that, the one question that never fails is, okay, if you think you've got it so bad, I'm going to be honest, in a room full of white people. Okay, white people, if you think you've got it so bad, then how many of you want to trade places with black folks in the industry right now? And I've never seen anybody raise their hand. Never.
Yeah.
Somebody might say, I'd trade places with Jerry because she's got a bomb ass life. They might say that, but if we call it what it is. So receiving takes a lot of support to even get to that place.
It really does. I'm really bad at receiving too. I'm really good at giving. I'm really good at supporting. I'm really good at being the secret keeper or the confidant or the person that supports other people. I'm really, really, really good at that. But when somebody tries to turn it around on me, I'm like, I don't know. Am I okay with this? Am I good? Like, I don't know. So even like taking a compliment is really often very difficult for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes practice for sure. Sometimes one of my mentors said, Matt, this is just when you say thank you. That's all.
It's funny because Jerry, she is my mentor, and I love Jerry because Jerry will be so blunt about it. She'll be like, hey, pay attention. Listen to what I'm saying to you. You did that right. That was amazing. And I'm like, okay, yes, thank you. But Jerry, that's the thing that I love about her is she's so drop dead honest that you can't get around what she's saying to you. So if she's telling you, you fucked that up, you definitely fucked it up, right? Jerry doesn't play. So I listen when Jerry speaks because even though she and I have very similar histories as far as working in the vet tech background and now into dog training and stuff, she's ahead of me and where I am in my dog training journey. And I'm going to listen to her because her experience is different than mine. And I think that that's the most important thing is that if people would just realize that listening to people who have different, similar, varied backgrounds, we would learn so much more, so much faster because we're taking into account that every situation is different and not trying to, with the whole background of dog training and the whole dog industry and everything, this is not a cookie cutter situation. We can't just cut and paste and apply and say this dog and this dog and this, because they're not. They're just as unique as you and I are from each other.
Yeah. I was reflecting back on, I spent the last 5 months working with an amazing coach. Big shout out and props to Nikki Black, NIKKIBLAK. Amazing human being. And I was saying to her in my reflection as we wrapped up this week, it has occurred to me that like the work never stops. It never ends. Mm-hmm. But that's different than the kind of workaholic life I was living. Like I've made a lot of really, really strong and firm and prosperous family life quality decisions. If I'm going to lose my business, I'll lose it, but I'm not willing to not be there for my kids' dinner time. Like I had to be clear about my priorities. But I said to Nikki the other day, I just realized that the work is never done.
It's not.
And then she said, yes, but you can change how you carry the load.
Yikes. You sure can. I'm going to have to spin on that one this week because how you carry the load and how you show up, that's pivotal. to how successful you are
and
and
sustainable.
how you can, yeah, and sustainable, how you move forward, how you act as a human. Was there a dog that had the biggest impact on you, that made everything just kind of fall into place for you?
Yeah, Renge. Yeah, my Korean Jindo, best friend, best friend. I love my humans, but I'm clear now that he was my best friend. And I met him at 4.5 years old. Back in the days when I would go to the shelter, when you shouldn't be going to the shelter because you're going to come home with a dog.
Yeah.
Uh, and I had gone to the shelter just because I'm just passing through, and I saw him and all the other dogs. They were just so stressed and they were yelling and screaming and all of those things. I walked past his kennel and he's just leaning against the side. He's not really doing anything, or just so. I think my take was composed. And I asked the handler, shout out to Charlotte, amazing animal person who was the lead volunteer there. And I said, "Can I meet him?" And she said, "Sure." I watched her bring him out on leash. I mean, talk about leash skills. I didn't have squat at the time. And I watched her bring him out on leash, and he climbed that leash like a savage shark. And I watched her handling and her handling, and she didn't get bit, and she didn't put intentional pressure on him to behave a certain way, and she just let it drop. And so I went home. I didn't tell my girlfriend at the time. The girlfriend that I actually initially moved in with, we were still together at that time when I met Little Kingston and I started my journey. I didn't tell her that I'd gone to see this dog. And I didn't tell her in part because she and her daughter had gone to see the dog earlier in the week. And they came home and they said to me, "We need to get another dog." And I said, "I'm not getting another dog unless I'm making more money." Something silly like, "And my team wins the World Series." Like things I knew just weren't possible at that stage in my life. But I went to go see him without telling them. And I came home and I couldn't stop thinking about him. And I was in a meditation. And in the meditation, I heard very clearly, "This is your dog and he will save your life someday." So I went back to visit him and went out to the big play yard this time with him and tried to play fetch, but I didn't know he had some resource guarding tendencies. So when I reached for the ball, he just about punctured me. He was like a bite level 4, bite level 5 dog. And Charlotte at the shelter, she said, "I don't know why he's still here." She said he's been adopted in return and he's got this serious bite history. "I don't know why he's still here." So ultimately, he came home and he was a most diligent and predictable and noble teacher. And part of what that looked like is every time he went for socks that were under the bed and I reached for them, he bit me because I wasn't smart enough to change the arrangement. And ultimately, I started to listen to him. And ultimately, what I learned is that he was a deeply sensitive, really kind, deeply loyal dog. And it took my son 4.5 years from the time my son was born. I was so careful with Renge and our son. It took him 4.5 years to touch him. And I remember it because, bless my son, he was so patient. And Renge came out and like pushed his little hip against my son. And I said, "I think that's a sign that Renge wants you to pet him." And my son pet him. And then Renge laid down and gave him a belly, which was very
Oh,
rare. And then my son pet him for like 20 minutes. And then Renge sneezed. That was always his cue that he's done. He sneezed and got up and chuffed and shook off and then walked away. He was everything I needed in a teacher that, gosh, I can't wait to see him. And when our daughter was very young and Renge was in his final stages, he was already, not because he was dying, he had already softened so much that she would come in. I'd be in the room and watch it, and she'd come in and he had the softest ears ever. And she would pet him and he would just push his head into her hand. And that's who he was. We had unpacked so much that's really who he was. Yeah, I don't want to go anytime soon, but I sure do want to see him.
well, let me tell you what I believe about dogs. I believe that they come back. I don't believe that they leave us. I mean, obviously, I believe that they stay with us throughout our whole life because they live here in our heart, right? I'm going to get emotional, so you can get emotional too. I see it. I see it coming.
Yeah.
But I believe that our dogs come back to us. And I believe that we don't realize it until we need to realize it. Because that dog outside, Fitz, that dog is Cajun, but he's also my first dog, Vince. And he comes back every 10-ish years in a different form with a different lesson and a different message and a whole bunch of different pow. Okay. So Renge is going to come back. And when he does, I want you to call me or email me or message me on Instagram. And I want you to say, "God damn it, Emily, you were right. And here he is. And this is going to be a whole different journey with him.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it will happen and it will hit you and you will be like,
Yeah.
because he's the same dog, but he's just a little bit different. And that personality, like I said, there's something about it. Like I just know that it's him.
Yeah.
Because that it's like a part of my soul has been missing and now it's back again. So I feel like full as a person again because twin flames are a thing, right? And that dog right there, that dog is my twin flame. He is. And Renge will come back. Just give him some time because he only will come when you absolutely need that lesson. When that big change needs to push through your brain, he'll be there. He'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll definitely let you know.
They're a wild, wonderful experience and they are messy and they are terrifying and they are heartbreaking, but I would not change it for any other experience in this life.
Yeah, they've changed my life and they've literally shown me the world.
Tell me your absolute favorite thing about dogs.
First three words, heart. Perspicacity. Do you know this word?
No.
Snap, I gotta look it up. So
I know lots of words and I don't know that one.
I have to look it up because I don't want to just be that guy. Patience, everybody, this might surprise nobody. The quality of having a ready insight into things. The quality of having a ready insight into things, which means you are a perspicacious person. So the only reason why I know that word is because many years ago, I studied musical theater in college. It was awesome. Awesome. I heard from my teacher, one of the best things I ever heard, singing is what we do when speaking will no longer suffice. So there was a song that I learned that had the word perspicacity in it. And I just hung on to that because I like pretending I know big words. I'll make them up if I can. But right there, that's how, that's the thing. Joy, love, and perspicacity, that they have an ability to, I don't want to go back to looking up the definition on the screen because I don't want to drop the screen again. But whatever I just said, that's what they have. Those are the three things that come to mind.
Dogs do, though. They have this innate ability to read us and see us for who we are. And honestly, back to your point about being bit, I think that one is a form of communication. They're saying, no, I'm not going to let you do that, or no, I don't like that. I think that that's a lot of why I didn't get bit, because when you approach with the intention of, I am here to help you, you tell me if you're comfortable, let me speak to you kind of thing, right? I fully believe that dogs understand us and our intentions on a way deeper level than we understand them, because they can smell things like fear and our heart palpitations and our anxiety and all those things, right? They sense all of that stuff. So their understanding, their language with us is so much more complex than we give them credit for. And they understand us on a way deeper level than we even understand ourselves sometimes. So being respectful and approaching with respect and laying yourself bare, literally, for a dog is like the best thing that you can do when it comes to that relationship building and those trust exercises, because the dog, again, is not going to judge you. The dog is then going to trust you and be in that circle with you. Just like with your daughter, it took a minute with your son, but because she had that experience, that learned experience with your son and that trust in you, your daughter was that much more easier to accept and be like, this is something I enjoy and this is something that I like. And I trust that he won't let anything bad happen to me. So that's a huge example of how we can build those relationships and how we can show those relationships to other people just by leading by example. And I think that you do such a beautiful job of that. The fact that you're so raw and you're so humble about your experience is so refreshing, because let me just say, for you to come forward and be like, my ego was this, my emotions were this, my addiction was this, and that was all trash, and here's where we are now. As a woman, that is so refreshing, because there are so many men out there that they don't just want to control dogs, they want to control women. They want to control children. They want to control the world around them. And a lot of it is because they are insecure human beings.
Yes.
So it says a lot about you as a person that you are willing to come out here and be friends with someone like me and have an open conversation like this in front of however many hundreds of thousands of listeners, and just be like, be a better person. and be better to dogs. And it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're willing to learn from them. And it's just beautiful. And I just appreciate that you do that on a weekly basis. I learn something from you and you rebuild my faith in humanity.
Thank you so much for that. In the spirit of receiving, I'm just gonna, yeah, that went like right to the heart chakra. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. You are truly an inspiration, and I truly value your opinion and your knowledge. And I just think that it's just so wonderful to make these connections. And it's so crazy that something like Instagram has forged all of these wild connections between people.
Yeah.
And I can't wait until we get the RV and we get on the road and I'll come visit you and we can just make something really amazing together.
Yeah, so true. Instagram's like that party that's super popular, but you get there, you're like, this party sucks. Let's go somewhere else. Like, let's go to the diner and talk. So we got to thank the party and the people that own the party and all their shittiness. But yeah, I respect it. There are cases like ours and like gratefully like a number of others where the social aspect of social media actually has yielded something. Yeah, appreciate that. It'll be really, really fun to see you in person. And I just so appreciate your content, how you talk about things, how you show up. I learn a lot and am inspired by watching the stuff that you do too. And that's the stuff, the baller stuff. Like, oh yeah, okay, I got to incorporate that. I really like that perspective on that. And just to keep downloading and bringing it in. And pretty sure that nobody woke up this morning and said, like we really need Matt Beisner to take charge of things. Pretty sure. So I'm going to just stay in my lane as best I can.
Same. But I feel like building this community that a lot of us are trying to build and a lot of us are working together and creating stuff like this for everyone to learn from, I think is just so important, and it is going to make change. And I think that if we are just persistent, it really will be. I cannot wait to continue to grow our friendship and create wonderful things with you. And in the spirit of that, what would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Hope. Hope stands for hear other people's experience.
And that is exactly what we do here, guys. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode with Matt. You guys can reach him on Instagram. You can find him on YouTube. You can find him on Netflix. You can find him everywhere. And if you can't find him on your own, reach out to me and I will connect you. And we will see you guys next week on Straight Up Dog Talk.
If Matt's words hit home for you today, I hope you'll check out the Dog People Evolution Conference. It's virtual, CEU approved, and filled with honest conversations about how we show up for our dogs and ourselves. This isn't your typical dog training event. It's emotional, thoughtful, and rooted in community. I'll be there too, and I'd love to see you join us. Just head over to dogpeopleevolution.com to learn more.